The black boy saved a pregnant woman from a burning car with just a tattered shirt. Then the black SUV changed his life forever. In the heart of New York City, far from the gleaming skyscrapers and tourist attractions, 12-year-old Alex made his way through the narrow streets of his neighborhood. Here, in one of the city's forgotten corners, graffiti-covered buildings stretched toward a sky often hidden by laundry lines strung between windows. Their small apartment sat on the third floor of a weathered brick building, its stairwell echoing with the footsteps of neighbors, all struggling to make ends meet. Through the cracked windows, the distant Manhattan skyline seemed like a different world entirely, close enough to see but too far to touch. Every morning, Maria, Alex's mother, left their apartment before sunrise, her worn shoes quietly navigating the creaking stairs. Her first job started at 6 a.m., cleaning houses in the wealthy neighborhoods uptown, where pristine kitchens and polished floors awaited her attention. By afternoon, exhaustion already setting in, she would change into her waitress uniform for the evening shift. And the smell of grease and cleaning products clung to her clothes, mixing with the weariness that seemed to seep into her bones. Yet she never complained, working double shifts with quiet determination, knowing her son's future depended on every dollar she earned. The memory of Alex's father lived in the small details, a faded photograph on their wall, a worn baseball cap hanging by the door, the empty chair at their small kitchen table. He had been a construction worker, one of many building the city's endless new developments, until an accident 3 years ago took him away forever. That day had changed everything, turning their modest but stable life into one of constant struggle and uncertainty. Despite his young age, Alex carried himself with a seriousness beyond his years. His dark eyes, inherited from his father, held a determination that matched his mother's. Every morning, watching her leave for work, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on his small shoulders. Though just a child, he understood that survival required everyone's contribution. After school, while other children played in the streets below, Alex would sort through recyclables or try to sell small crafts he made, hoping to add even a few dollars to their meager income. Each morning, before the city fully awakened, Alex would gather his handmade crafts in a worn backpack. His small workshop consisted of a corner in their tiny apartment, where he transformed discarded materials into something valuable. Old magazines became colorful paper beads for bracelets. Broken toys were reimagined into new creations, and scraps of fabric turned into simple accessories. His fingers, already calloused at 12, worked skillfully with whatever materials he could find. On the streets, he would position himself near busy intersections, hoping to catch the eye of passing pedestrians. "Only $2, he would say softly, holding up a carefully crafted bracelet, though most people hurried past without a glance. In their small kitchen, Maria would sit late into the night, bills spread across their wobbly table, her face illuminated by the dim light of a single bulb. The stack of unpaid bills grew taller each month, rent, utilities, groceries, while their income remained desperately inadequate. She would count their meager savings again and again, trying to stretch each dollar further. The landlord's warnings about late rent payments haunted her dreams, while the growing cost of food meant increasingly sparse meals. Sometimes she would catch herself staring at the empty refrigerator, fighting back tears as she wondered how to make their next meal last longer. The weight of poverty pressed down on Alex like a heavy blanket, making even simple dreams seem impossible. At school, he watched other children talk about weekend plans and new games, while he calculated how many bracelets he needed to sell to help with next week's groceries. The cycle seemed endless, each day bleeding into the next, each small victory immediately swallowed by another pressing need. In quiet moments, he would gaze at the city skyline, wondering if there would ever be a way out of this endless struggle. Despite these hardships, Alex faced each day with quiet determination. While other children his age complained about homework or chores, he had learned to manage his time between school, crafting items to sell and helping at home. There was no time for self-pity in his schedule. Instead, he channeled his energy into finding creative solutions to their daily challenges. Whether it was fixing a broken appliance to save money or finding new ways to make his crafts more appealing, Alex tackled each problem with resourcefulness beyond his years. Maria's heart would break a little each time Alex needed something for school, a new notebook, pencils, or required reading materials. She would watch him carefully erase each page of his old notebooks until they were usable again, or tape together broken pencils to make them last longer. On particularly difficult days, when he needed something she couldn't provide, she would find him pretending he didn't really need it, trying to spare her the pain of saying no. These moments haunted her, fueling both her determination to work harder and her deep sadness at being unable to give her son the childhood he deserved. The afternoon sun hung heavy in the sky as Alex trudged along the city street, his worn backpack weighing on his thin shoulders. The familiar route home felt longer today, after another unsuccessful attempt at selling handmade trinkets. His feet dragged against the hot pavement, each step a reminder of another day's struggles. Suddenly, a sharp crack pierced the air. Alex's head snapped up, his eyes widening at the sight before him. A sleek black car, its polished surface gleaming in the sunlight, sat at an odd angle by the curb. Thin wisps of smoke curled from under its hood, quickly growing thicker and darker. Small flames began to dance around the engine, their orange tongues reaching higher with each passing second. The expensive vehicle, so out of place in this run-down neighborhood, was rapidly becoming engulfed in fire. Alex stood frozen, watching as the smoke billowed upward, creating a dark cloud against the clear sky. The acrid smell of burning rubber and metal filled his nostrils, making his eyes water. Inside the car, a figure moved frantically behind the tinted windows. The driver's door shuddered but wouldn't open, stuck fast in its frame. Panic-stricken sounds filtered through the glass as the flames grew more intense, casting an eerie glow on the street. The woman's face pressed against the window, her features distorted by fear. Her hands beat against the glass. Her cries became more desperate as smoke began seeping into the car's interior. She was trapped, and the fire was spreading quickly. "Help!" Her muffled voice carried through the glass. "Please, somebody help me!" Her eyes, wide with terror, met Alex's across the distance. In them, he saw raw fear and a silent plea for assistance. Time seemed to slow as Alex realized the gravity of the situation. The flames were growing larger, and the woman's chances were getting slimmer with each passing moment. The choice before him was clear, yet terrifying. Without hesitation, Alex sprang into action, his heart pounding against his ribs. The suffocating heat hit his face as he raced toward the burning car, but he didn't slow down. Years of hardship had taught him that sometimes you had to face your fears to do what's right. "I'm coming!" he shouted to the trapped woman, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The flames danced higher, casting orange shadows across his dark skin. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he pressed forward, focused only on reaching the driver's door. The metal handle burned his palm as he grabbed it, but Alex barely noticed the pain. He pulled with all his might, muscles straining against the jammed door. The woman's frightened eyes met his through the window, and he saw a glimmer of hope replace some of the fear. "Stand back from the door!" Alex called out, his voice clear and commanding despite his young age. He braced himself, feet planted firmly on the ground, and pulled again. The heat grew more intense, and smoke swirled around him, making his eyes water. Still, he didn't let go. Flames crept closer along the hood, and Alex could hear the ominous crackling of fire growing stronger. Time was running out. He knew the car could explode at any moment, but the thought only made him more determined. The woman's life depended on these crucial moments, and he refused to give up. Gritting his teeth, Alex summoned every ounce of strength in his 12-year-old body. The door resisted, groaned, and finally gave way with a metallic screech. Acrid smoke billowed out, but Alex stood his ground, ready to help the trapped driver to safety. Alex quickly scanned around, his mind racing. No water, no fire extinguisher in sight. The flames were spreading faster, threatening to consume the entire vehicle. Without thinking twice, he pulled off his worn shirt, the only one he owned for school. "Stay close to me," he shouted to the woman, who was now coughing from the thick smoke. His bare skin felt the intense heat, but he didn't flinch. The old shirt wasn't much, but it was all he had. Using the shirt as a makeshift fire blanket, Alex began beating at the flames near the engine. Each swing sent sparks flying, some burning his arms and chest. The acrid smoke made his eyes water and his lungs burn, but he kept going. "We need to stop it from reaching the fuel tank." His voice was hoarse from the smoke, but determined. The woman, now free from the car, stood nearby, watching in amazement as this young boy fought the fire with nothing but an old shirt. The flames hissed and sputtered as Alex attacked them relentlessly. His shirt was already starting to burn at the edges, but he didn't stop. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with soot and grime. The heat was unbearable, but giving up wasn't an option. Time seemed to stretch as Alex battled the flames. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but something inside him refused to quit. He thought of his mother, of all the times she'd fought against impossible odds. This was his moment to be just as brave. "Don't give up," he whispered to himself, continuing to fight the fire with his rapidly disintegrating shirt. The woman's life was worth more than any piece of clothing, no matter how precious it was to him. The driver, though shaken, quickly joined Alex's efforts. "There's some sand in the trunk," she called out, her voice trembling but determined. Together, they rushed to retrieve it, every second precious as the flames continued their relentless dance. "Here, like this," Alex demonstrated, throwing handfuls of sand at the base of the flames. His small hands worked quickly, methodically. The woman followed his lead, her expensive clothes now covered in soot and sand. They worked in silent synchronization, two strangers united against a common enemy. The heat was suffocating, and smoke stung their eyes, but neither stopped. Alex's chest heaved with effort, his bare skin glistening with sweat and ash. The woman's face showed equal determination, despite her obvious fear. They threw more sand, watching as each handful fought back the hungry flames. Gradually, impossibly, the fire began to retreat, first at the edges, then slowly at its heart. The fierce crackling quieted to angry hisses, then to weak sputters. Minutes felt like hours, but they persisted, throwing sand until the last flame died out. When it was finally over, the woman turned to Alex, her eyes brimming with tears of gratitude. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch his shoulder. "You saved my life," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "A young boy with nothing but courage and an old shirt." Alex stood there, covered in soot and exhausted, but feeling a strange mix of pride and humility. The woman's eyes held something he'd never seen before. Not pity or dismissal, but genuine respect and gratitude. Her elegant appearance was disheveled, her expensive clothes ruined, but her smile was radiant with thankfulness. "I just did what anyone would do," Alex replied softly, suddenly aware of his bare chest and the remains of his burnt shirt on the ground. In the fading chaos, Alex noticed something he hadn't seen before. The woman's hand rested protectively over her swollen belly, and her designer dress, though now covered in soot, draped elegantly over her pregnant form. Her other hand still trembled as she steadied herself against the car. "My baby, you saved both of us," she said softly, tears streaming down her face, leaving clean trails through the smudges of ash. Her voice cracked with emotion as she looked at Alex. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." She straightened her posture, trying to regain her composure, but her eyes never left Alex's face. Despite her disheveled appearance, the expensive pearl necklace now gray with soot, her carefully styled hair in disarray, she carried herself with grace. The relief in her eyes was mixed with something deeper, a profound gratitude that words couldn't fully express. I need to know the name of my guardian angel," she said, managing a warm smile despite her obvious exhaustion. "I'm Victoria." Her hand reached out, not with the condescension adults often showed to children from his neighborhood, but with genuine respect. Alex hesitated for a moment, unaccustomed to such attention. "I'm Alex," he replied quietly, his voice rough from the smoke. "Are you and your baby okay?" His concern was genuine, focusing on her well-being rather than any expectation of reward. Victoria's eyes softened at his question. "Yes, thanks to you, Alex. Thanks to your incredible bravery." She paused, studying him with growing interest. "Please, tell me about yourself. Where do you live? Where are your parents?" The woman studied Alex thoughtfully, her eyes softening with compassion. "Let me help you and your family," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What you did today was extraordinary, and I want to do something in return." She reached into her smoke-stained purse, pulling out a business card with trembling fingers. "I have the means to make a difference in your life, and I'd very much like to try." The card gleamed with gold lettering, a stark contrast to Alex's soot-covered hands as he accepted it hesitantly. "Please," she added, "let me do this." Standing in the fading afternoon light, the woman's eyes filled with concern as she asked about Alex's life. Her questions were gentle but direct. "Where do you live? Who takes care of you? Do you go to school?" Each query was delivered with genuine interest, her hand still resting protectively over her pregnant belly as she listened. Alex shuffled his feet, suddenly conscious of his bare, dirty chest and worn pants. The woman noticed his discomfort and slipped off her expensive jacket, offering it to him without hesitation. The simple gesture of kindness made it easier for him to open up. With a heavy heart, Alex began sharing his story. He told her about their tiny fourth-floor apartment where the ceiling leaked when it rained. He described his mother's exhausting schedule, cleaning houses by day and waiting tables at night, and how the bills kept piling up despite her endless work. His voice trembled slightly as he explained about selling handmade crafts on street corners, trying to help with their mounting debts. "Sometimes we don't have enough for food," he admitted quietly, looking down at his feet. "Mom skips meals so I can eat, but I know she's hungry too. The landlord keeps threatening to evict us, and Mom's so tired all the time." He trailed off, emotions catching in his throat. "We try so hard, but it never seems to be enough." The weight of their financial burden seemed heavier as he spoke about it, each word carrying years of worry and struggle. He described the constant fear of eviction, the careful rationing of every dollar, and the endless cycle of barely making ends meet that defined their existence. "The rent is due in 3 days," Alex continued, his voice growing softer. "Mom's been staying up late every night, counting our savings over and over, but we're still short. I see her crying when she thinks I'm asleep." His hands twisted together nervously as he spoke. "I've tried selling more things, but people rarely stop to buy. I don't know how to help her anymore." The worry in his young eyes spoke of burdens no child should bear. He described how his mother's shoulders slumped a little more each day, how her smile grew more strained as the deadline approached. Their small savings, tucked away in an old envelope, wasn't enough to cover even half the rent this month. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside their apartment building. The woman from yesterday, now dressed in a fresh suit, stepped out carefully, one hand supporting her pregnant belly. She looked up at the worn building, taking in the crumbling facade and broken windows. When she spotted Alex, waiting nervously by the entrance, her face brightened with a warm smile. "I couldn't stop thinking about you and your mother," she said, approaching him. "I want to help." She opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This will cover your rent, not just this month, but for the next 6 months. It's the least I can do for the brave young man who's saved my life." Her voice was firm but gentle, leaving no room for argument. "Please, let me do this. You deserve a chance to be a child, not worried about adult problems." Alex stood frozen, his mind struggling to process her words. This kind of generosity seemed impossible, like something from a dream. His heart raced with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Could this really be happening? He'd heard stories about people promising help before, only to disappear. Part of him wanted to believe, while another part waited for the catch, the hidden price that must come with such kindness. The woman knelt down slightly, meeting Alex's eyes. "There's more," she said softly. "I want to help you with your education. I'll pay for your school fees, all your books, uniforms, everything you need to focus on learning." Her voice grew animated as she outlined her plans. "You'll be able to attend a good school, have proper supplies, join after-school programs. You won't have to worry about counting pencils or making notebooks last longer." She pulled out a brochure from her bag, showing him pictures of a well-equipped school with bright classrooms and modern facilities. "This could be your new school. You have so much potential, Alex. All you need is an opportunity to shine, without the weight of financial worries holding you back." "And for your mother?" she continued, her face brightening with purpose. "I own several hotels in the city. I can offer her a position at our flagship location, the Grand Plaza." She described a job that seemed too good to be true. A management position in guest services with regular hours during the day. The salary is 3 times what she makes now, with full health insurance for both of you. She'll have paid vacation time, sick leave, and opportunities for advancement. The woman explained how Maria would no longer need to work 2 exhausting jobs. Instead, she'd work in an elegant environment, wearing a proper uniform provided by the hotel. "She'll be home every evening to have dinner with you," she added, understanding how meaningful this would be. No more late nights at the diner. No more cleaning other people's houses. She can have a career she's proud of, with dignity and security. Maria stood in their small kitchen, her work-worn hands clasped tightly together as she listened to Alex relay the woman's offer. Her eyes darted between the business card and the envelope full of money, suspicion etched deep in the lines of her tired face. Years of broken promises and disappointments had taught her that nothing in life came without a price. The offer seemed too perfect, too generous, like a dream that would surely shatter come morning. "It's not possible," she whispered, more to herself than to Alex. "No one just gives away money and opportunities like this. There must be something else, something we're not seeing." Her voice trembled with the weight of past experiences, of times when hope had turned to bitter disappointment. When the wealthy woman arrived at their apartment, Maria's scrutiny was intense. She studied every detail of the elegantly dressed visitor, from her expensive shoes to her perfectly styled hair. The contrast between them couldn't have been starker. Maria in her faded uniform, the woman in her designer clothes. Each word of the generous offer made Maria's suspicion grow stronger, her protective instincts flaring. Years of watching other families fall victim to scams and false promises echoed in her mind. She remembered warnings from her own mother. If something seems too good to be true, it usually is. The neighborhood was full of stories about people who'd been taken advantage of by those with money and power. Maria took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Her voice was steady but cautious as she addressed their visitor. "Why would you do this for us? What do you want in return?" She held her head high, despite her worn clothes and tired appearance. "I've learned that nothing in this world comes free. There are always conditions, always a catch." Her questions continued, each one carefully considered. How can we be sure this is real? What happens if we accept and then something changes? What exactly would you expect from my son? The protective edge in her voice was unmistakable. "I need to understand everything before I can even consider this offer. My son's future isn't something I can gamble with." The years of struggle had made her wary, and she wasn't about to let anyone take advantage of their desperate situation, no matter how genuine they appeared. Each question was like a brick in a wall of protection she'd built around her family. The wealthy woman leaned forward, her eyes filled with sincerity as she spoke. "I understand your concerns, Maria, but please believe me when I say there are no hidden conditions. Your son saved not just my life, but my unborn child's as well. How can I put a price on that? I've been blessed with success in my life, and now I have a chance to make a real difference in someone else's. That's all I want, to give back, to help a brave young boy who didn't hesitate to risk his own safety for a stranger." Her voice grew softer as she continued. "I know it seems too good to be true, but sometimes life gives us moments of pure grace. This is one of them." Maria's shoulders slowly relaxed, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. The weight of their current situation, the unpaid rent, Alex's worn clothes, the constant struggle pressed heavily on her mind. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right," she said quietly. "We've prayed for help for so long. Maybe this is the answer." Alex watched this exchange with mixed emotions churning inside him. The offer seemed like something from a dream, a chance to escape their daily struggles, to see his mother smile without worry again. Yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Could they really trust this elegant stranger? Would everything change once they accepted her help? His mother's warnings echoed in his mind. "Never trust strangers easily, Alex. The world can be cruel to those who are too trusting." He'd heard these words countless times throughout his childhood, usually after witnessing another family in their neighborhood fall victim to false promises. After several deep breaths, Maria straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the woman. "If this is real, if you truly mean what you say, then yes, we accept your help." Her voice trembled slightly. "Not for me, but for Alex. He deserves a chance at a better life." The decision seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders, even as new worries settled in. Standing in their tiny kitchen, Alex felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Just yesterday, he'd been selling trinkets on the street, worried about their next meal. Now, suddenly, everything was changing. Gratitude welled up inside him, mixed with disbelief and hope. He looked at his mother's tired face, imagining how different their lives might become. The future, for the first time in his memory, held more promise than fear. "Thank you," he whispered to their benefactor, his voice thick with emotion. "We won't let you down." The woman smiled warmly, and in that moment Alex felt the first real stirring of hope that their lives were about to change forever. The morning of Alex's departure arrived with a stillness that felt almost sacred. Sunlight crept through their apartment window, illuminating the small bag he had packed, a few clothes, his school books, and the wooden figure his father had carved years ago. Each item seemed to weigh more than usual, carrying memories of the life he was about to leave behind. His fingers trembled slightly as he zipped the bag closed. The familiar sounds of the neighborhood filtered through their thin walls. Mrs. Johnson's radio playing gospel music, children's voices rising from the street below, the rattle of the ancient heating pipes. These sounds, once background noise, now felt precious, like a song he needed to memorize before it faded away. "Everything ready?" Maria asked, her voice catching slightly. She stood in the doorway, trying to smile through eyes bright with unshed tears. Alex nodded, unable to find words for the storm of emotions churning inside him. The city where he would study seemed vast and unknown, a world away from these streets where every crack in the sidewalk told a story he knew by heart. Questions tumbled through his mind like autumn leaves. Would he fit in at the new school? Could he handle the advanced classes? What if he disappointed everyone who believed in him? The weight of opportunity felt heavier than any burden he'd carried while selling trinkets on the street corners. Maria moved closer, adjusting his collar with trembling hands. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered, her words carrying years of love and sacrifice. Alex hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, trying to store this moment in his memory. Outside their window, the neighborhood was waking up, unaware that for Alex, this morning marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. They walked together down the worn stairs of their building, each step echoing with finality. Neighbors called out goodbyes, old Mr. Thompson giving a solemn nod from his stoop, the Rodriguez kids waving excitedly, Miss Clara wiping her eyes with her apron. These people were more than neighbors. They were witnesses to his journey, keepers of his childhood memories. Standing on the sidewalk, waiting for Victoria's car, Alex took one last look at his world. The graffiti-covered walls that had been his canvas of dreams. The basketball hoop with its frayed net where he'd spent countless afternoons. The corner store where he'd counted pennies for bread. Each sight carved itself deeper into his heart. "I'll make you proud, Mom," he promised, his voice stronger than he felt. Maria squeezed his hand, her smile wavering but determined. "You already have, mi amor," she replied softly. "You already have." The sleek car appeared at the corner, a glimpse of the different world awaiting him. As Alex hugged his mother one final time, he felt the divide between his past and future growing wider with each heartbeat. Yet somehow, in that moment of goodbye, he found a courage he didn't know he possessed, the courage to step forward into the unknown, carrying his mother's love and his neighborhood's strength like talismans against whatever challenges lay ahead. The city rose before Alex like a wall of glass and steel, each building reaching higher than anything he'd ever seen in his neighborhood. Victoria's car glided through streets that seemed to pulse with a different kind of life, one of endless motion and possibility. Digital billboards flashed advertisements in brilliant colors, and the sidewalks teemed with people in suits and designer clothes, their shoes clicking against pristine pavement. "It's quite different, isn't it?" Victoria asked gently, noticing Alex's wide-eyed expression. He could only nod, his throat tight with emotion. Here, even the air felt different, thick with the scent of coffee shops and restaurant kitchens instead of the familiar cooking smells from his neighbors' windows. Crowds surged around him as they stepped onto the sidewalk, a river of humanity that seemed to flow with purpose and urgency. Alex clutched his bag closer, feeling small and insignificant among the towering skyscrapers. These buildings didn't just touch the sky, they seemed to pierce it, their glass surfaces reflecting clouds and sunlight in ways that made him dizzy. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing into their phones, wearing clothes that probably cost more than his family's monthly rent. Alex looked down at his worn shoes, suddenly aware of every scuff mark and frayed edge of his clothing. In his neighborhood, these things had never mattered. Everyone wore what they could afford. But here, everything screamed of wealth and status. The school building appeared ahead, an imposing structure of red brick and gleaming windows. Students streamed through its gates, their backpacks loaded with expensive laptops and textbooks. Alex's heart hammered in his chest as he followed Victoria up the stone steps. Inside, the hallways stretched endlessly, lined with lockers that shone like soldiers standing at attention. His new classroom felt like entering another world entirely. Clean whiteboards replaced the chipped blackboards he knew, and each desk held a tablet computer. The other students barely glanced up as he entered, too absorbed in their conversations about weekend plans and upcoming events that sounded like a foreign language to his ears. "Class, this is Alex," his new teacher announced, her voice kind but formal. "He'll be joining us for the remainder of the year." 20 pairs of eyes turned to study him, some curious, others indifferent. Alex forced himself to stand straight, even as he felt the weight of their stares. He noticed their perfect haircuts, their unstained clothes, the easy way they occupied space, as if they'd never questioned their right to be there. During lunch, he sat alone at the edge of the cafeteria, watching groups of friends gather at their usual tables. The food on his tray looked strange, options he'd never seen before, served in portions that seemed wastefully generous. A few tables away, he heard laughter and animated discussions about vacation homes and private tennis lessons. The distance between his old life and this new reality stretched wider with each passing moment. "Is this seat taken?" a voice asked. Alex looked up to see a boy about his age, Adam, he remembered from class introductions. Before he could answer, Adam had already sat down, offering a friendly smile. "The first day's always rough," Adam said, his easy manner somehow making the cafeteria feel less overwhelming. "But it gets better, I promise." Alex wanted to believe him, but as he watched the busy life of the school swirl around him, he couldn't help but feel like an astronaut who had landed on a distant planet, everything familiar, yet nothing quite the same. The world he'd left behind this morning seemed impossibly far away, and this new world, with all its shine and opportunity, felt just as impossibly out of reach. In the crowded hallways between classes, Alex felt like a shadow moving against the current. Groups of students clustered together, sharing inside jokes and stories of weekend plans, while he drifted past, unseen and unheard. Their conversations floated around him, talk of summer houses, private tutors, and family vacations, reminding him of the invisible wall that separated their world. During group projects, he noticed how others hesitated before including him, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. Some spoke slower when addressing him, as if his different background somehow affected his ability to understand. Each interaction felt like trying to cross a bridge that kept growing longer with every step. But in the quiet of the library, Alex found his sanctuary. While other students rushed home to their comfortable lives, he stayed behind, hunched over textbooks that held the promise of a better future. His notebook pages filled with careful notes, each word a small victory in his battle to catch up. Math problems that seemed impossible at first slowly began to make sense under his determined gaze. Late into the afternoon, when shadows stretched across the study tables, Alex's eyes would burn with fatigue. The weight of everything he needed to learn pressed down on him like a physical burden. Sometimes, looking at his classmates' effortless understanding of concepts he struggled with, maybe I don't belong here, he'd think, his pencil hovering uncertainly over half-finished homework. But then he'd remember his mother's face, the pride in her eyes when he left, and something would strengthen inside him. He'd straighten his shoulders and return to his studies, refusing to let exhaustion or self-doubt win. Each solved problem, each understood concept became a small step forward, even when the path ahead seemed endless. Every evening at exactly 7 o'clock, Alex would find a quiet corner in the dormitory hallway, phone pressed to his ear, his mother's voice bringing warmth to the sterile space. These calls became his anchor, connecting him to the world he'd left behind. "How are your classes, Miyamura?" Maria would ask, her voice carrying both worry and hope across the miles. Alex carefully chose his words, sharing his small victories while softening the daily challenges. "Math is getting better, Mom. The teacher says I'm improving," he'd say, not mentioning the late nights spent struggling with formulas that his classmates seemed to grasp effortlessly. Maria listened intently to every word, her heart catching at the slight tremors in her son's voice that others might miss. She knew him too well, could sense when he was putting on a brave face, could hear the loneliness beneath his careful descriptions of school life. "Are you eating enough?" she'd ask, remembering how thin he'd looked at their last goodbye. "The cafeteria food is good," Alex would assure her, though he still wasn't used to the strange new dishes. During these calls, Maria would share small news from home, how Mrs. Johnson asked about him, how the neighborhood kids missed their basketball games. Her voice would swell with pride when telling neighbors about her son studying at the prestigious city school, though in quiet moments her eyes would drift to his empty bedroom, aching with the silence. "I'm so proud of you," she'd tell him, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be too." These words would wrap around Alex like a warm embrace, giving him strength for another day. Some nights, after they'd said goodbye, he'd sit alone in the hallway for a few extra minutes, holding on to the echoes of her voice, drawing courage from her unwavering faith in him. Even when tears threatened to spill, hers from missing him, his from the weight of all he was trying to achieve, they maintained their ritual of ending each call with hope. "Tomorrow will be better," they'd tell each other, a promise that carried them both through their separate struggles in their different worlds. The library had become Alex's usual hideout during lunch breaks, until one day Adam appeared between the tall shelves, his familiar grin brightening the quiet space. "You know, the cafeteria serves much better food than these books," he joked, sliding into the chair across from Alex. His dark hair fell casually across his forehead, and his warm brown eyes held no judgment, only friendly interest. At first, Alex responded with cautious smiles and brief answers, protective walls built from years of struggle still standing firm. But Adam had a way of making everything feel easier, more natural. He'd share his study notes without being asked, explain complex problems with patient clarity, and most importantly, treat Alex like he belonged there all along. "You're actually pretty good at this," Adam commented one afternoon, watching Alex solve a particularly challenging math problem. "You just think too much about getting it wrong." Something in Adam's casual confidence began to rub off on Alex. Small changes appeared. Alex started raising his hand in class, first hesitantly, then with growing assurance. His voice, once barely above a whisper, grew stronger. During group projects, Adam would naturally pair with Alex, creating a bridge between him and their classmates. "Hey, Alex had a great idea about this," he'd say, drawing others into their discussions. Slowly, the invisible barrier between Alex and his classmates began to thin. He found himself joining conversations, sharing thoughts, even laughing at inside jokes he now understood. The transformation wasn't dramatic, no sudden metamorphosis from shy to outgoing, but rather a gradual awakening. Alex discovered that his perspective, shaped by different experiences, often offered unique solutions to problems. His classmates began to notice too, seeking his input not out of pity, but genuine interest. "You're different now," Adam observed one day as they walked between classes. "Still you, but more you, if that makes sense." Alex understood perfectly. He stood taller now, spoke clearer, looked people in the eye. The halls that once seemed impossibly wide had shrunk to normal size, and the elegant school building felt less like a foreign country and more like a place where he could belong. Late one evening in the school library, Alex paused over his physics textbook, his mind drifting to the children back in his old neighborhood. He could see their faces clearly: Tommy with his worn sneakers, Sarah who sold flowers on weekends, Miguel who dreamed of becoming a doctor but couldn't afford proper school books. The equations before him suddenly felt like more than just homework. They were keys that could unlock doors for others like him. The memory of his mother's stories floated back, as vivid as yesterday. He could hear her voice, soft and tired after a long day of work, telling him about his father's dreams of education. "Your father always said knowledge was the one thing nobody could take from you," she'd whisper, stroking his hair. "He wanted so much for you to learn, mi amor." Now, surrounded by books and opportunities his father never had, Alex understood the weight of those words differently. Each formula mastered, each concept understood, wasn't just a step away from poverty. It was a torch he could pass on. He thought about how his mother had worked double shifts, her hands raw from cleaning, just to keep him fed and sheltered. Her sacrifice wasn't just for his escape. It was an investment in possibility. During weekend calls home, he started asking about the neighborhood kids, especially the younger ones. "Maybe when I'm home next," he told his mother, "I could help them with their schoolwork." His voice grew animated as he described his ideas, informal tutoring sessions, sharing study techniques he'd learned, showing them that dreams of education weren't just fantasy. His mother's silence on the other end spoke volumes before she found her voice. "You sound just like your father," she said softly, pride and tears mixing in her words. "He always said that true success meant lifting others as you climb." That night, as Alex returned to his studies, each page seemed to glow with new purpose. The complex mathematics wasn't just about passing tests anymore. It was about building bridges back to his community. He imagined himself returning home, not just as a success story, but as proof that dreams could take root even in concrete cracks. That knowledge could flow back to fill the empty spaces where hope had run dry. In his dormitory room, Alex sat at his desk long after his classmates had gone to sleep, the city lights twinkling beyond his window like distant stars. His textbooks lay open before him, each page representing another step toward the future he envisioned. The late hours didn't feel like sacrifice anymore. They felt like investment, not just in himself, but in every child back home who needed to see that dreams could become reality. He traced his finger along a complex equation, remembering how Mr. Thompson's son had once asked him about mathematics. "When I go back," he whispered to himself, "I can show him how these numbers dance." The thought gave his tired eyes new energy, pushed his mind to grasp one more concept, solve one more problem. Meanwhile, in their small apartment back home, Maria sat in Alex's old room, holding a recent photo of him in his school uniform. Her son looked different now, shoulders straighter, eyes brighter, wearing the kind of confidence she'd always prayed he'd find. The room felt emptier without him, but her heart was full knowing he was building something greater than himself. "He's doing so well," she told Mrs. Johnson over coffee one morning, her voice trembling with pride. "The teachers say he's one of the hardest working students they've ever had." Yet at night, alone with her thoughts, worry would creep in like a familiar shadow. She'd heard stories of bright young minds losing their way in the big city, forgetting their roots, becoming strangers to their own families. But then Alex would call, and her fears would melt away. He'd talk about his studies with passion, but also ask about everyone back home. Had Tommy's sister gotten better? Was old Mr. Thompson still fixing radios? Did the community center still need volunteer tutors? In these moments, Maria knew her son hadn't just grown smarter, he'd grown wiser. "You know, Mom," he said during one call, his voice soft but determined, "everything I'm learning here, it's like building a bridge. One end is anchored in our neighborhood, the other reaches toward something better. But it's not just for me to cross, it's for everyone who needs a way forward." Maria pressed her hand to her heart, tears spilling onto her cheeks. This was more than she'd dared to dream, not just a son escaping poverty, but one determined to return with hope in his hands. Yes, the city was full of dangers and temptations, but her Alex had found something stronger: purpose. The transformation appeared gradually, like dawn breaking over city skyscrapers. Alex's test papers began returning with higher marks, red circles of approval replacing the question marks that had once dominated his work. In mathematics, where he had once struggled to keep pace, he now found himself helping classmates understand complex problems. His physics teacher stopped him after class one day, eyes bright with approval. "You've come further than any student I've seen," she said, and Alex felt warmth spread through his chest. But success tasted different when seasoned with memory. Each achievement carried the weight of his past, making victory both sweeter and more solemn. Late at night, studying under his desk lamp, Alex would pause between problems, his mind drifting back to earlier days. He remembered countless evenings when his mother returned home exhausted, her hands raw from cleaning other people's houses, yet still finding energy to ask about his day. The memory of her tired smile pushed him through the hardest assignments. In his wallet, Alex kept a worn photograph, a snapshot of his old neighborhood street, where broken concrete sprouted determined weeds, and graffiti told stories of dreams both lost and found. The picture was creased from frequent handling, but its images remained sharp in his mind. The basketball hoop with its frayed net, Mrs. Johnson's small flower garden fighting through cracks in the sidewalk, the corner store where he'd counted pennies for bread. During difficult moments when equations blurred and academic pressure mounted, he would take out this photo. Each detail reminded him of why he studied so hard, the younger kids who used to watch him sell trinkets, now looking up to him as proof that escape was possible. The old men who played chess in the park, their wisdom contained in stories rather than textbooks. His mother's small apartment, where love made up for what money couldn't buy. These memories weren't chains holding him back, but roots giving him strength. When calculus seemed impossible, he remembered how his mother had made impossible choices to keep food on their table. When chemistry formulas threatened to overwhelm him, he thought of Mr. Thompson, fixing radios with practiced patience, teaching him that understanding comes from persistence. One particularly challenging evening, as he wrestled with advanced physics concepts, Alex pulled out his father's old watch, broken now, but still carrying echoes of dreams unfulfilled. The scratched face and worn leather strap spoke of a life cut short, of opportunities denied. His father had dreamed of education, but never had the chance. Now, as Alex traced the watch's outline, each tick he couldn't hear pushed him to read one more page, solve one more problem, climb one step higher on the ladder his father had hoped to build. During one weekend video call home, Alex noticed Tommy's little sister peek into the frame behind his mother, eyes wide with curiosity. They modeled the afternoon of their dormitory room visible in the background. Their questions struck something deep within her as she saw the child's hunger for something more. "Tell me about your studies," he said gently, watching her face light up as she described her struggles with fractions. For the next 15 minutes, he explained mathematics in ways she could understand, using examples from their neighborhood, like dividing pizza at Mr. Thompson's birthday gatherings, or calculating change at the corner store. When understanding dawned in her eyes, Alex felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was becoming a beacon of possibility. In his own classroom, the change was equally profound. The invisible wall that had once separated him from his classmates had gradually dissolved. During group discussions, his unique perspective, shaped by life's harder lessons, often offered insights others hadn't considered. His classmates no longer saw him as the scholarship student from the poor neighborhood. They saw Alex, the friend who could explain complex problems with patient clarity, who brought different ways of thinking to their projects. "You've really found your place here," Adam remarked one day as they walked between classes. Around them, other students called out greetings, some stopping to discuss the upcoming physics test or share weekend plans. Alex realized he no longer felt like an outsider looking in. The elegant hallways that had once seemed so intimidating now felt familiar, almost like a second home. Yet this comfort hadn't made him forget the harder path that led here. Each evening, as he bent over his studies, Alex understood with growing clarity that education wasn't just about memorizing facts or passing tests. It was about building a ladder that others could climb. Every equation mastered, every concept understood, was another rung he could offer to those who would follow. "There are no shortcuts," he explained to Tommy's sister in another call, "but every step forward makes the next one easier." He saw himself in her determined nod, in the way she clutched her worn notebook. The same determination that had driven him to sell trinkets on street corners now fueled his late-night study sessions. Success wasn't just about escaping poverty. It was about creating a map for others to follow. Back in their modest apartment, Maria sat at their small kitchen table, penning another letter to Alex. Her hands, worn from years of cleaning homes, moved carefully across the paper. "My dearest Alex," she wrote, pausing to wipe away a tear. "I miss you every day, but knowing you're getting an education fills my heart with joy." She glanced at his last report card, proudly displayed on their refrigerator, held by a magnet he had made years ago. Despite working double shifts at the hotel Victoria had helped her secure, Maria never forgot to send words of encouragement to her son. Each letter carried her dreams and hopes, carefully wrapped in simple words of love. "Keep studying hard," she would write. "Your future is brighter than all the stars in the sky." Even when exhaustion crept into her bones after long hours of work, she found strength in knowing her son was building a better life. In the quiet evenings, she would sit by their window, looking at the city lights in the distance, imagining Alex in his school, growing stronger and wiser with each passing day. Though her arms ached to hold him, her heart swelled with pride knowing he was walking a path she had only dreamed of. Every letter she received from him was like a precious gift, read and reread until the pages grew soft at the edges. Would you like me to continue with the next sections about Alex's hopes for the future and Victoria's support? One evening, as Alex watched the sunset from his dormitory window, memories of his old neighborhood flooded back. He saw the faces of children just like him, playing in dusty streets with makeshift toys, their dreams as confined as his once were. In that moment, something shifted inside him, a realization that his journey wasn't just about escaping poverty, but about creating a path for others to follow. The education he was receiving wasn't just a gift for himself, but a torch he could use to light the way for others still trapped in darkness. On weekends, when Alex returned home, he began setting up informal classes in the community center, a weathered building with peeling paint and creaky floors. He arranged old chairs in a circle and spread out borrowed textbooks on wobbly tables. "Who wants to learn something new today?" he would ask, and small hands would shoot up eagerly. The children came with curious eyes and hopeful hearts, some as young as 7, others close to his own age, when he'd started his journey. Each session brought new challenges and joys. Alex taught them basic math on a salvaged blackboard, helped with reading comprehension, and shared study techniques he'd learned at his new school. "Remember," he'd say, pointing to simple equations, "these numbers are like puzzle pieces. Once you understand how they fit together, everything becomes clearer." The children would lean forward, their faces intent with concentration, reminding him of his own early struggles and triumphs. The transformation in these young faces became Alex's greatest reward. He saw their eyes light up when they solved a problem, their proud smiles when they read a difficult word, their growing confidence as they mastered new skills. One little girl, her hair in neat braids like he once wore, announced she wanted to be a doctor. A boy who used to spend his days collecting cans now dreamed of becoming an engineer. The dreams, once as limited as the streets they lived on, were expanding like morning sunlight breaking through clouds. In quiet moments between lessons, Alex would stand at the community center's window, looking out at the neighborhood he'd grown up in. The same cramped buildings stood against the sky, but now he saw them differently, not as prison walls, but as foundations waiting to be built upon. One day, he promised himself, "I'll come back here for good, not just to teach, but to transform." He imagined turning empty lots into learning centers, abandoned buildings into libraries, bringing opportunity to every corner where hopelessness once lived. The dream felt as real as the chalk dust on his fingers, as tangible as the grateful smiles of the children he taught. The city's bright lights and towering buildings no longer intimidated Alex as they once did, but new challenges emerged daily. Sometimes they came in the form of complex mathematics problems that kept him awake late into the night. Other times as subtle reminders of his different background, the way some classmates glanced at his second-hand uniform or whispered about his accent. Yet Alex faced each obstacle with the same determination that had helped him survive on those dusty streets of his old neighborhood. "Education is my way out," he would remind himself, bending over his textbooks even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. In his physics class one afternoon, while watching a demonstration about persistence of motion, Alex had an epiphany about his own journey. Just as an object in motion tends to stay in motion, he realized that persistence in working toward a goal creates its own momentum. The small victories, improving his grades, understanding difficult concepts, earning his teacher's approval, built upon each other like blocks in a foundation. Even setbacks became valuable lessons, teaching him that success wasn't about avoiding failures, but about rising after each fall. This understanding transformed how he approached every challenge. When a particularly difficult assignment in advanced mathematics threatened to defeat him, Alex didn't give up. Instead, he broke down the problem into smaller parts, tackling each piece with patience and determination. Hours turned into days, but eventually the solution emerged. His teacher's proud smile confirmed what Alex was beginning to believe, that perseverance could overcome any obstacle. As his confidence grew, Alex began noticing how his example affected others. During study groups, he found himself naturally taking the lead, helping struggling classmates understand difficult concepts by relating them to real-world experiences. "Think of algebra like solving a puzzle," he'd explain, using the same approach that had helped him grasp these concepts. His classmates started seeking him out, not just for academic help, but for advice on facing their own challenges. Each time he helped someone understand a difficult concept or overcome a personal obstacle, Alex felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He realized that his journey wasn't just about personal success anymore. It was about becoming someone who could lift others up along the way. One evening, after helping a classmate understand a difficult concept, Alex sat quietly in the library, reflecting on his journey. The soft lamplight illuminated his textbooks, but his mind wandered to deeper thoughts. Success, he realized, wasn't measured by the better clothes he could now afford or the prestigious school he attended. True success lay in the grateful smiles of those he helped, in the knowledge that he could lift others as Victoria had lifted him. This understanding filled him with a sense of purpose, stronger than any desire for personal wealth. He began seeing his education not as a ladder to climb alone, but as a bridge he could help others cross. Each challenge Alex faced became a lesson etched into his character. When he struggled with advanced calculus, it taught him patience. When he faced subtle discrimination, it taught him resilience. Even homesickness, which sometimes crept up during quiet nights, taught him appreciation for his roots. These difficulties weren't obstacles to overcome, but stepping stones shaping him into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Every challenge, he would remind himself, is another brick in the foundation I'm building. In class, when others might give up facing difficult assignments, Alex pushed forward with unwavering determination. He remembered the burning car, how he hadn't hesitated despite the danger. That same courage now fueled his academic pursuits, late nights studying, extra tutorials, constant practice. Nothing seemed too demanding when he focused on his goals. Even when fatigue weighted his shoulders and doubt clouded his mind, Alex refused to let go of his dreams. Every solved problem, every improved grade, became a small victory in his larger battle against the limitations life had once placed on him. Back in their apartment, Maria sat reading Alex's latest letter, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. The words spoke of more than just academic achievement. They revealed a son growing into a young man of character and purpose. Her initial fears about sending him away had transformed into quiet pride. Through his letters, she could sense his growing confidence, his deepening understanding of the world. "My boy," she whispered, pressing the letter to her heart, "you're becoming more than I ever dreamed possible." The worry lines on her face had softened, replaced by the gentle curves of a mother's pride in watching her child find his way in the world. In the library's quiet corners, where sunlight filtered through tall windows, Alex immersed himself in studies beyond his regular coursework. He devoured books about social change, educational theory, and community development. Each page turned was another step toward his vision of helping others escape poverty. During breaks between classes, he could often be found taking detailed notes, not just about academic subjects, but about ways to make education more accessible to underprivileged children. "Knowledge isn't just power," he would say to himself. "It's a light that can guide others out of darkness." Maria's letters always carried wisdom that kept Alex grounded, despite his growing success. "Remember where you come from, my son," she would write, her words carrying the weight of generations. "Our struggles have made us strong. Our hardships have taught us compassion." In their weekly phone calls, she would remind him of their family stories, how his grandmother had worked 3 jobs to send her children to school, how his father had dreamed of education before his untimely death. These stories weren't just memories. They were threads connecting Alex to his roots, reminding him that success wasn't about leaving his past behind, but about building upon its foundation. In the bustling city, Alex discovered that friendship could bridge many gaps. He formed study groups that brought together students from different backgrounds, wealthy classmates who'd never known hardship, international students struggling with language barriers, and scholarship students like himself. These diverse connections created a network of understanding and support. Through Adam's introduction, he met students involved in community service projects. Together, they organized tutoring sessions for underprivileged kids, combining their different strengths and experiences. "We all have something to teach," Alex would say during their planning meetings, "and something to learn from each other." Without intending to, Alex became an inspiration to his peers. His story of perseverance spread through the school, not as gossip, but as a testament to the power of determination. When younger students struggled with self-doubt, teachers would often suggest they talk to Alex. During these conversations, he would share not just his triumphs, but also his failures and fears, showing that success wasn't about being perfect, but about persisting despite imperfection. "I was once afraid of higher mathematics," he would confide, "but I learned that every problem can be solved if you break it down into smaller steps." His candor about his journey from poverty to academic success resonated deeply with others facing their own challenges. Even some of the wealthy students, initially distant, found themselves drawn to his authentic leadership and genuine desire to help others succeed. In study groups and school projects, Alex's approach of combining academic excellence with community service created a new model of achievement, one that measured success not just in grades, but in positive impact on others. Standing at his dormitory window one evening, Alex held 2 photographs, one of his old neighborhood and one of his current life at school. The contrast was striking, yet he saw them not as separate worlds, but as chapters in the same story. His past, with its dusty streets and daily struggles, had taught him resilience and compassion. His present, filled with opportunities and learning, was building the foundation for his future dreams. He placed both photos on his desk, a reminder that success wasn't about leaving his past behind, but about building bridges between where he came from and where he was going. Each day brought new evidence that determination could reshape reality. Alex watched as his grades improved steadily, as his confidence grew stronger, as doors that once seemed forever closed began to open. When younger students asked him about his journey, he would share how he once thought his circumstances were fixed and unchangeable. But everything can change, he would tell them, his voice filled with quiet conviction. Every small step forward, every hour of study, every moment of perseverance adds up to create transformation. During a weekend visit home, Alex noticed the profound changes in their lives. Their apartment, though still modest, now felt lighter, filled with hope instead of worry. His mother no longer carried the weight of constant anxiety on her shoulders. She hummed while preparing dinner, something he hadn't heard since his father passed away. The sight of her peaceful smile, the way she could now enjoy simple moments without fear of unpaid bills or eviction notices, filled Alex's heart with joy. This, he realized, was perhaps his greatest achievement, not his academic success, but the peace it had brought to his mother's life. Thoughts of Victoria often filled Alex's mind, especially during moments of achievement. Each success felt like a small repayment of her faith in him. One day, he promised himself, "I'll create opportunities for others, just as she did for me." He understood now that her help wasn't just about money. It was about seeing potential in someone when they couldn't see it in themselves. About having the courage to reach out and make a difference in someone's life. In his volunteer work with younger students, Alex began to understand the deeper meaning of helping others. He saw how support and encouragement could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the initial act of kindness. When he helped a struggling student grasp a difficult concept, he wasn't just teaching mathematics, he was showing them they were capable of more than they imagined. This understanding transformed his approach to giving back. True help, he realized, isn't about creating dependency, but about empowering others to find their own strength. Each person he assisted became part of a growing chain of positive change as they, in turn, reached out to help others. One evening, while reviewing his progress since arriving at the school, Alex found his old notebook from his first week of classes. The struggling handwriting and basic mistakes made him smile, not with embarrassment, but with understanding. Success, he had learned, wasn't like the sudden rescue from the burning car. It was more like building a house, brick by brick, day by day. Some days the progress seemed invisible, other days brought setbacks, but gradually, steadily, the structure of his future took shape. Every small victory, he wrote in his journal, is one more step forward, even when the destination seems far away. The joy of learning had transformed Alex in ways he hadn't expected. He remembered the boy who once sold trinkets on dusty streets, afraid to dream too big, and compared him to who he had become, someone who not only dreamed, but helped others dream too. During class discussions, he found himself eager to share ideas, no longer self-conscious about his background, but proud of the unique perspective it gave him. The satisfaction of mastering a difficult concept now rivaled the joy he once felt from earning a few dollars from his sales. His mind had expanded beyond survival to embrace the possibilities of what he could achieve and how he could help others. Looking ahead, Alex's vision extended beyond his own success. He planned to continue his education, pushing himself further, knowing that each new skill and piece of knowledge was another tool he could use to help others. He imagined establishing educational programs in his old neighborhood, creating opportunities for children who, like him, needed just one chance to prove themselves. He would say during student council meetings, "Isn't just about personal achievement, it's about lifting up entire communities." As Alex sat in his favorite study spot in the library, surrounded by books and possibilities, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It hadn't started with the burning car or Victoria's generosity. It had started with countless small choices: the decision to help others despite his own poverty, the courage to accept help when offered, the determination to work harder when things got tough. Every choice, no matter how small, had been a step toward transformation. He realized that true change wasn't about waiting for big moments, but about having the courage to make the right choices every day, no matter how difficult. His path, built on perseverance, kindness, and determination, had proven to be the right one. Alex's courage not only saved 2 lives that day, it sparked a chain of kindness that transformed an entire community. Sometimes, the bravest actions come from the most unexpected heroes. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Alex's situation? We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to catch more inspiring stories of everyday heroes who prove that courage knows no age. Hit that notification bell to join our growing family of storytellers and dreamers. Remember, like Alex showed us, it's not about what we have, but what we're willing to give that makes the biggest difference. See you in the next story.